So once again, the daily participation, click on resubmit and type three significant things. Economists. And first of all, it's important to know that economists today, and this hasn't always been true, but economists operate as scientists. And so they follow the same scientific method that you would have learned about, for instance, in middle school, that biologists and chemists and everybody else uses. They gather, or they make observations, they form a hypothesis, they gather evidence, they test out that hypothesis, and they come up with an answer to their question, and they eventually form a thesis or theory based on that evidence. And so they boil the world down into models usually so that they can practice these theories as much as possible within a simple construct so that way they can use math. So often we see economists express themselves using charts and graphs, the supply and demand graph, for instance, or production possibilities, frontier. All of those are just ways to do that. And of course, that's part of the criticism of economics, is it tries to boil the complexity of human beings down to simple models. But anyway, the first and foremost person that we think of when it comes to economics wasn't really an economist because there wasn't such a field back then, but that would be Adam Smith. And Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, basically saying that economic freedom was the most important thing in order to inspire productivity. The people should be able to pick and choose what productivity they have, what kind of work they do, what kind of products they sell. And they, because of their self-interest, wanting to do better on behalf of themselves, acquiring the best life, are going to compete with others to try to gain an advantage and get that better life. And so employees are going to try to work better in order to get promoted or get hired. Companies are going to make better products in order to sell them to make a profit. And so he believed that was a natural mechanism to make people better and to make products better. And so he just said, basically, in almost all cases, it's not necessary for the government to be involved because things in the marketplace will work themselves out on their own. He referred to this through a metaphor known as the invisible hand, that it's almost as if there is a hand guiding the economy toward better decisions. He would say if an employer was not paying their employees enough, then those employees would go somewhere else to find a job. And so they would eventually have to raise their prices. If a company was making bad products, people just wouldn't buy it. And they'd either have to shut down or make their products better. And so he said there was this invisible hand to try to guide them as much as possible. And there's a French phrase that he used to signify the fact that government should have little or no involvement here. And this is a phrase that we heard back in government, laissez-faire. And that means that, of course, there's little or no government involvement at all. When we learned about it in respect to leadership, a laissez-faire based leader lets kind of people do their own thing and doesn't really micromanage that much. And so that same phrase applies to economics here. The next person I'll talk about was more of a historian or social commentator, but he also is included in economic theory, and that would be Karl Marx. And we already mentioned him in reference to command economies. Karl Marx, along with Engels, wrote the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, two books, where he basically said that the workers in the misery of urban industrialization, where they're doing these boring jobs and making all these products that's making someone else rich, will eventually rise up through elections or through revolts, violent revolts, and basically seize control of the government and then take power over the means of production. So the businesses will now be owned by the people. They could pay everyone a good wage. They could eliminate the need for the struggle for economic survival. People wouldn't be starving anymore. People wouldn't need to steal anymore. There wouldn't be any more violence. And so eventually, after the socialist stage, where the people through the government has seized everything, once they make everyone equal, then there'll be no need for tension anymore, and there'll be no need for government anymore. And we'll be able to evolve into a communist society, which really was meant to be a utopia with limited government and people just striving to be the best they can because it's what's best for everybody. It's good for the collective good. But of course, we know that in the socialist stage, the people that take control like the Communist Party in China or the one in the Soviet Union, want to keep control, and they never really get to the point of actual communism, even though they call themselves that. Karl Marx believed that all the tension would be gotten rid of because a lot of it takes place between the proletariat, the working class, and the bourgeoisie, the middle class, which in the United States and Europe means something completely different. In the United States, we think everyone belongs to the middle class. It's all average Americans. But in Europe, it meant business owners, government officials, doctors, lawyers, teachers, accountants, professionally educated people. So the middle class was a much smaller group. Then there's David Ricardo. David Ricardo was in the 19th century, and he believed that trade was essential. Adam Smith kind of hinted on this earlier, but David Ricardo would really take off on it. And he said, actually, when you restrict products within a country, whenever you say buy American only, and you don't allow companies to make products elsewhere, or you don't go and you buy resources elsewhere, he said that drives up prices. It drives up prices and makes an inefficient economy because now you're restricting companies' freedom. They no longer have to compete with other companies around the world, and it makes everyone worse off. He believed that the most important thing was not having an absolute advantage, making the best product. He believed the best thing was comparative advantage, meaning that compared to other people, you were using less resources to make a product. That's the only way to distribute resources in the best way possible and make the economy as efficient as it can. So David Ricardo really promoted what we call today free trade. And when we say free trade, we don't mean it doesn't cost anything. We mean it's free from government interference. No tariffs, no restrictions on where goods and labor can be purchased. And the last one I'll mention is Milton Friedman. He was a conservative economist that influenced Ronald Reagan quite a bit. And he kind of emphasizes some of the earlier things that Adam Smith said. Because by the point that Milton Friedman was well known and was being listened to by Ronald Reagan, the idea was that we have too many taxes, too many regulations, too many pollution laws, too many labor laws, things like that. And so he believed that we needed to reduce the amount of laws and taxes because that's the only way we can encourage entrepreneurship. That's the only way people want to start new businesses if they don't have to face a lot of regulation and taxes. So Milton Friedman was a big fan of reducing the size of government, going back to some of those key ideas of Adam Smith. So if you